Griffins. Now, this family in our church, their grandson plays for Guelph. And so this was a wonderful evening to be together, to meet him, and to hear about how life is going for him in Guelph and on the basketball team. Brock ended up winning by quite a bit, and I think we might have been the only ones cheering for Guelph a little bit. It was a pretty full gymnasium of Brock fans, and I was aware of being torn because Brock is the home team. My wife works for Brock as one of the chaplains there, so I thought I'd have to answer to her for why I'm not cheering for Brock. So I cheered for both teams. I might have been the only one cheering for both teams. During the warm-up, the Brock Badgers did a drill that I had never seen before. They all came out and they didn't have a ball. They all stood in formation and started to pretend to pass the ball to one another. And they did that for 5 minutes to trust that everyone would have their hands ready to catch the ball, that they would all be in movement to get to the pre-assigned spots so the offense would move smoothly. And I was really taken with that drill. And then 5 minutes later, the basketballs came out and they fully warmed up for the game and ended up really dominating Guelph. Well, I was thinking about how much our community loves sports. I was reflecting on how many conversations that I have with our dear St. George's people where sports are mentioned. From our youth, yes, but also throughout the whole generations represented in our community. Those who love hockey, longtime Maple Leafs fans, God bless you. I hear this year's the year. It was amazing. For a special drill, the goalie for the Leafs went out in the parking garage and he tried to stop the team bus, but it went between the pads. So I don't know if this will be the year. The World Series is ongoing. There is a lot going on with sports. And then, of course, my sense is basketball is well supported and represented in our community. So I was thinking about all of this on this day of Alexandra's baptism, on this day where the gospel has Bartimaeus pleading on the roadside for help, to be seen, to be noticed. And then I thought about my own life with sports, and if I could name a couple of sports for myself, I would name golf and I would name basketball. Now, I want to provide a disclaimer about golf in the beginning here, because I know it's a sport that many of you love and that you play with family and friends, and it's a wonderful time and a good walk spoiled. I know all that. But today, I want to use golf as an example of an individual sport versus a team sport, okay? So I know golf is wonderful, but it's also an individual sport. That is, that it is you against the course. It is your swing that is involved in the game. It is your clubs. It is your balls. It is your balls that go into the water, right? Golf is an individual sport. You're drawn inward in golf. And actually, there's been some studies about how difficult individual sports can be on the mind. Isn't that interesting? Not that there's not tremendous benefit, but there's been some studies around the self-competition that we engage with something like golf and other sports that are individual sports. But I think there's something that goes a little bit beyond that, because golf, in that drawing inward, I think, like other individual sports, can speak to us of our society, of the very fabric of our lives in the world we live in. A world with much isolation, a world that is drawn inward more and more to me and my things, my stuff, my opinions, not the collective. And I think we know this to be true. And I think we also know that leadership for generations has reflected that. Kings and queens and CEOs and our bosses, there can be that sense of those who really draw inward, who do not see the wisdom in the room, who do not build a concept of team and what that means. So the experience is more like golf or other individual sports. And we know how that feels. Contrast that with a team sport like basketball, for example. In basketball, there is incredible teamwork involved. There is group cohesion. There is the rehearsing of a strategy and a coming together. There is a sharing. So there's an anti-hierarchical system in place at the outset of a basketball game. And that is people can move to different spots of the floor. You're not controlled to where you can go. You can see that in the adults versus youth games downstairs. Everybody moves to the different areas. Basketball is meant to be inclusive. And indeed, our community is an inclusive community, and our basketball games that we play are open to everyone. We have that reflected on both teams. We have that reflected in the leadership around the games. What else do team sports provide like basketball? They teach teamwork, cooperation, resilience, problem solving, learning to navigate shared space, growing the skills of interpreting what is going on. Team sports challenge perfectionism, frustration tolerance. They're also meant to be inclusive of communities that are struggling. You just need a couple of hoops and a ball. And so, in vulnerable neighborhoods, there are often rec centers or outdoor basketball courts where people can be together and they can play basketball together. So what does that look like here at St. George's on this wondrous day of baptism? What does that look like for those who follow Jesus? Well, I want to suggest to you this morning that it is my experience and my deepest sense that our community reflects a faith that is more of a team sport. That when I think of all of the ministry at St. George's, like the Apple Crisp team that met yesterday until after 7 o'clock last night, making sure we had Apple Crisp this morning after the 8 o'clock service, and for us today after the 10 o'clock service, it speaks to me of what it means to be a team, to work together, to see the job done. When I think about the breakfast program, I think of all the moving parts that speak of the life of faith and the life of service being a team sport. When I think about our ministry team, our pastoral team, I think of ministry being a team sport. This co-rectorship that we have at St. George's is a passing of the ball in a different way than the Anglican Church has done. It is a team sport. Last week, we launched our Joyful Giving campaign with a meeting after the Soup Sunday. And since then, we've had 2 other meetings to talk about how we engage joy with our giving of time, talent, and treasure. Martha and I gathered with Mike and MJ and Brad and Tanya to present to all of you what has happened in the priority areas since those areas were set. Martha spoke about the experience of COVID and the need to rebuild. And she thanked Tanya and Brad for the incredible work that they've done in rebuilding their ministry since COVID, in our youth programming and in our music programming. And everyone at the meeting responded with gratitude. She thanked all of us. In fact, Martha spent a lot of time reimagining what it would be like to bring the Joyful Giving presentation to all of us this year. And I want to thank her in the sermon this morning as she thanked all of us for our ministry. Now, I'm not going to share everything from that hour meeting. It just gets me too excited and we don't have that much time. But I do want to share a little bit about what Tanya said on this Children's Liturgy Sunday. Because Tanya talked about how difficult it was during COVID to not have very many kids for a while. And then she talked about how rebuilding the program week after week, we're seeing 10 to 16 kids, the normative kind of basis, that are all engaged in their time here at St. George's with Tanya and with one another, from the children to our youth, from the Sunday school programming to the confirmation classes, to the basketball, where you wipe the floor with the adults every single time. But all of this speaks of the life of faith here being a team sport. And then I think about the baptism of Alexandra and the welcoming of you, Alexandra, to the body of Christ here this day. In your baptism and the welcoming of your family to the team sport we have here. I wonder if this is too far to pass the ball. I think it might be. But the joy of welcoming all of you to the life of this community. And I'm thinking about how the church's teaching on this vision of the collective is on full display at a baptism. How parents and godparents present those who are to be baptized to the priest. And when those candidates are a little older, like Alexandra, they also answer. So we have both. You were presented and you said you want to be baptized, right? And then the congregation is asked, will you support Alexandra in her life and faith? And there was a resounding, we will. All of the teaching of looking at the world, of Christianity being a team sport, is on full display today. Jesus built his team, his first team of 12. In the gospel this morning, we have the story of Bartimaeus, who is begging by the side of the road, suffering profoundly. In first century Israel, blindness guaranteed poverty. It guaranteed social isolation, suffering in all compartments of life. Jesus walks by with his team, and Bartimaeus says, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stops and asks the very people who have been socially isolating Bartimaeus to bring him forward. The story tells us he regains his sight and follows Jesus on the way. It's a powerful story for us as we reflect on Christianity being a team sport, to resist the temptation to draw inward. I love that Jesus also heals the blindness of the crowd. He heals the drawing inward, the ignoring of suffering, those indifferent or annoyed by the suffering in their midst. To them, Bartimaeus is invisible and extendable. He doesn't engage their patience or support. But once they see it, they cannot unsee it. And I think that's true. Once you see the suffering of the world, once you see the poverty in downtown St. Catharines on our property in the breakfast program, you cannot unsee it. So the crowd being healed says, take heart, get up. He is calling you. Jesus heals them, and they participate in Bartimaeus' healing. So the team moves the ball and impacts not just his physical sight, but his experience of being included, his experience of life from that point on. This is what happens when we bring the ways of heaven to earth, when Christianity is a team sport. When lives are touched in a way that mimic basketball more than golf today and other individual sports. When that happens, people are built up, they're included, they're part of a team. Self-worth increases. And we all know this about leadership, don't we? We all know this generationally, and about our bosses, and about all the ways that we experience either drawn into the individual or a collective experience of life. We know what both of those feel like. On this day, we're invited to think about our collective love of sports here on this day of baptism, to reflect on what it means to be on God's team together, to resist the temptation, to draw inward, and to engage the suffering around us, and to work as a team of Jesus Christ, God's royal family, adopted into the ways of heaven here on earth. As the drill the Brock Badgers do when they pretend to pass the ball, that everyone is a part of together, moving around, though no one is holding the ball, is a metaphor for life in God's world. Baptism is always a day we can look up from the waters and pass the ball. Amen.